o'clock. If you can stand and say the pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right, thank you, everyone. So before we get started, you may notice that we are missing our wonderful Mrs. Morin. So when you do speak, try to speak clearly into the microphone so she can take our minutes later. So we need correspondence.
Two things this evening. The first is we received a letter from the New Hampshire Education Department for our facility approval here at Goffstown High School. I shared with the board that we had a visitation and about 15-page packet that we had to submit prior. We did receive that approval from the department, so that letter's here. The other piece is I included the technical advisory. This is the only technical advisory that the New Hampshire Education Department has issued this year, but this has to do with our requirement to provide a meal to all children. This is problematic for our kindergarten students. So this is in reference to RSA 189.11, and we'll be discussing this a little more later on, but I wanted to include the technical advisory for the board to review as well.
Great, thank you. All right, commendations, good news. Lil?
Hello. So first of all, this is Colin Zink. He is a student at Goffstown High School. He's a junior. He's shadowing me today to kind of get the feel for what the board is like, how these meetings kind of go. So he will be running for the next year's school board representative. This week is, yes. This week is AP test week. So there's tests going on in the library all week. Prom is on May 24th, and Rho Kappa just had their board elections for next year this morning. Kind of a slow week, but it's test week, so, you know.
Thank you, Lil.
Yeah,
go ahead, Wendy.
Great. So over at Mountain View, two sixth grade students, Oliver North and Austin Franco, came in second place in the stock market game this spring semester. All of Team 6 students did an outstanding job. Many schools from around the state participated in this, and we had 7 teams place in the top 10, which is pretty remarkable. So the stock market game allows students to delve into the intricate world of stock trading by investing a virtual $100,000 in real-time stock markets. Through this platform, students learn about economics, finance, and the dynamics of the financial markets. Oliver and Austin made just shy of $33,000 on their $100,000 investment. So really nice job to them and all the students on Team 6-2 who participated in that. Also, last week, Neil and Marga from WZID made an appearance at Bartlett to present Mrs. Crete the April Teacher of the Month Award. She was nominated by a colleague for this well-deserved honor. Neil, Marga, and a representative from Auto Fair presented her with a nice award, and it was done in front of her students, which made it really special. So congratulations to Mrs. Crete. And then all the buildings this week are celebrating staff appreciation. So thank you to the board, parents, everybody else for taking a moment to thank a teacher or a staff member this week. We really appreciate it.
Great, thank you, Wendy. Anyone else? Oh, go ahead, Brian.
So I don't normally share input during this time because I have the superintendent's report, but this one I just couldn't wait. So if everyone would indulge me. We're very pleased to announce that our own Lil Hazelbaker was selected by the New Hampshire School Boards Association as as the scholarship award winner this year. So, surprise! You won! Congratulations, Lil. And the next thing is at our next meeting, either Barrett Christina or Becky Wilson from the School Boards Association will be here to present Lil. And but spoiler alert, you won. Congratulations.
Well deserved, Lil.
Thank you.
Is there anything else? That's a big one at the top. No other accommodations, good news? All right. So we have public comment. I'll open up. I do have 3 names here, so when I call your name, you're going to come up to the microphone. Please state your name and address clearly in the microphone. We ask that you keep your comment to 3 minutes or less. This is not an answer and question dialogue. So the first person is Nancy Biederman. Hi, Nancy.
Hi, how you doing?
Good, how are you?
Scott gave me a pep talk. He's like, keep it brief. I don't know if I'm going to do that. Sorry.
Well, you got 3 minutes.
I haven't done well yet. All right, just to give some context as to why I'm here, back on February 2nd, I met with the members of the Goffstown High School staff and Principal McBride. I had informed them that I had testified in favor HB 1419 relative to prohibiting obscene or harmful sexual materials in schools. While testifying, I heard many Democratic representatives state, we don't need to put forth legislation to regulate obscene material in schools because RSA 571B covers it. Well, I'm here to see if that is true. RSA 571 states, it shall be unlawful for any person knowingly to give, sell, loan, or otherwise provide with or without monetary consideration to a minor any picture in any form of any graphic. I'm trying to be brief, Scott, there. I didn't read the whole thing. Soon after that meeting, I sent in a request for 3 books to be challenged according to school board policy IJL. I submitted the forms required under policy IJLR. I subsequently heard back from the committee on March 20th with its final report. This was within the 30 working days that the policy stipulates. I was also kept informed as to when the Materials Review Committee was meeting by Mr. McBride. I have their final report here. The policy then stipulates that if the complainant, me, did not accept the decision by the committee, which I don't, I could ask the superintendent to review the challenge. This was done on March 20th, and I still have not received any response to my challenge. I last heard from the superintendent on March 26, 2024. According to this, the IJL policy, there's no deadline for the superintendent to respond to my complaint, and he can choose not to respond forever, according to your current policy. Of course, if I don't agree with the superintendent's decision, I can then bring it to you, the school board, for you to decide. Finally, if I don't agree with your decision, I can always go to the New Hampshire Department of Education. Since this has been more than a month since my request for a decision, I decided it was time for other people in town to know what books I'm challenging and why, as someone in the last school board meeting was asking. First, the 3 books I chose were because of the sexual, graphic, obscene pictures that were contained in the books. I did not know who the author was or what the books were about. So those who think I'm targeting a specific group or author, you are wrong. To any group that needs to use sexually graphic pictures to get your message across, you need to rethink how your message is to minors. After I testified at the State House, I was given a list of obscene graphic books by another parent, and I was surprised that these books were at the Goffstown High School Library. There are many more books on the list, but again, my purpose was to see if RSA 571B would protect the children of Goffstown, so I only chose the first 3 I found.
Nancy, you have about a minute.
Thank you. The 3 books I've challenged were Pride of Baghdad, Fun Home, A Family Tragicomedy, and Zara's Paradise. All 3 of these books are graphic novels. Going down my list here. The review committee decided not to remove the books, if you haven't gotten that already from what I've said. They based it on intellectual freedom. I'm all for freedom, but minors need guidance, and we have restrictions on what they can and cannot be exposed to. Educational suitability, exposure to diverse content. Tell me how exposing these students to minors to graphic images is suitable. It's not. It's child abuse. Showing children sexualized images before maturity is harmful to their brain development and overall mental health. There have been many scientific studies that have come to this conclusion. In fact, a recent study has stated that one of the reasons for the mental health crisis of students today that we are facing is from exposure to pornography. First
All right,
Amendment
Nancy,
rights, these come with restrictions.
It's been 3 minutes. Wrap it up, please.
You cannot yell fire in public. If you do, you face consequences. Again, we need to go after these books. Finally, I request that besides adding a deadline to the superintendent's reply to the IGL policy, I would like a review of all the graphic novels at Goffstown High School to be sure that they're not harmful to minors according to New Hampshire law.
Thank you.
I will
Can you
submit these.
email that to Mrs. Moran or leave
I
it
will.
with us?
And I will include all of the graphic pictures too.
Perfect, thank you. Appreciate it. I have a David Bausch. Bannock? Oh, I'm sorry.
That's okay.
Didn't mean to say that wrong. Welcome.
That's okay. My name's David Bannock. I live at 71 Elm. I wanted to thank the school board for their work in protecting our students, especially from outside groups that are willing to restrict the freedom of our students and of our community to read the things that are good for them as chosen by professionals. I think the administrators of the school, the librarians of the school, and the teachers of the school are very well qualified to make the decisions. They're not going to be looking at passages out of context. They're not going to be misinterpreting graphics. They're not going to be making suggestions with an intent that isn't aimed at our students, but is aimed at outside political groups and storing political points. I think that the New Hampshire way of live free or die, liberty means being able to have your children read what they want to read and what you want them to read. It doesn't mean not allowing other people to be able to read what they want to read and what their children, what their parents think they should read. And the decisions about what's appropriate for various different ages should be made by qualified professionals, by administrators, by librarians, and by teachers. And I think that Goffstown's a very friendly place where we look out for our children. I can say, I'm an education professional that deals with some of these populations, and I can say that being able to read material that's appropriate to you, that deals with your issues, that deals with your populations, saves lives, and it prepares students for the complex world that they're going to have to live in their time beyond this. So I hope that you'll protect the freedom of parents to choose their reading and the welfare of the students that are here at Goffstown, and make prudent decisions about what things to keep in the library. Thank you.
Thank you, David. And the last one is Megan Boyd. Hi, Megan, welcome.
Hi, Megan Boyd, 2 Reed Street. So I just wanted to speak on behalf of the freedom to read. Parents do have a right to guide their children's reading and education, but individuals should not be making decisions for other readers or for other parents. MVMS, thanks to Wendy and that great presentation, has safeguards in place that are actually more aggressive than most of the other towns in the state, in place to protect kids and to protect parents' choices. School educators and librarians in our schools are amazing. They're professionals who don't impose their biases, but make knowledge and ideas available to kids so that they can have the freedom to choose. No system, apart from shuttering the library completely, will provide every fail-safe to keep kids from being exposed to material that maybe makes them uncomfortable. And also, in light of the fact that my kids go to MVMS and the vast majority of kids have phones in their pockets all day, and without having to trudge up the stairs at Mountain View can access any kind of inappropriate content at any time, but we're focused on the library, which boggles my mind a little bit. When I was in middle school, To Kill a Mockingbird, Lord of the Flies, Catcher in the Rye, and my favorite book of all time, The Great Gatsby. Part of the reason my daughter is named Daisy is because of the impact that book made on me when I was in middle school. These books have all been recently removed from school libraries because of bans, and it's upsetting to me. Those books made me feel uncomfortable at times when I was reading them in school, but I was reading them in a place where there were trusted adults that I could talk to and professionals. So I'm here to speak on behalf just of keeping the library a place where there's freedom for kids to read.
Thank you, Megan. All right, is there anyone else? Hi, Donna, come on up. I know you came in late.
Hi, sorry.
That's okay.
Donna Pinard, 65 Riverview Park Road, lifelong citizen of Goffstown. I was also a teacher up until 2022, and I retired from SAU 19. We seem to be having a problem with hiring and defining professional. We have bulletin boards at MVMS, but we can't blame the counselor who put that up. And we have the librarians who are not responsibly curating books. Nobody's keeping books away from anybody. We have a public library here in town, and they prominently display those books. They're there for any citizen to get, any parent who wants to get it for their child. It is there. when we're having problems with, bathroom policies, it's under control. But that control automatically pits groups against each other. And as a public school, if I am a religious parent, then I have a right to send my child to a public school and not have them indoctrinated by professionals who've been trained in teacher colleges who only professionally put forth one idea. We cannot be religious bigots. We have to allow the public school, fly your flag at home, leave the public schools alone. Thank you.
Thank you, Donna.
I have one.
Go ahead, Scott.
Scott Gross, 57 Range Road. I wanted to talk to you about two pieces of legislation. I didn't want to blur the lines between my role as a business administrator and my ability as a taxpayer and in Goffstown. But I wanted to make you aware of two bills that are out there. So when we were at these deliberative sessions, both in Goffstown and New Boston, there was a lot of discussion about affordability and taxes. There are two bills that have passed the House that are currently in the Senate that will have a significant impact on reducing tax burdens in both Goffstown and New Boston. So the first one is House Bill 1656, and this would provide much more aid and for special education services. And this passed overwhelmingly in the House on a 349 to 26 vote. There are very few things that are bipartisan in New Hampshire, and this one would give a lot more money for reimbursement, base adequacy for special education. So it's currently in the Senate, and again, I don't want to blur the lines, but if that is something that you think that you would support, I would encourage folks to look at House Bill 1656, and your state senator is Keith Murphy in Goffstown, and it is Senator Denise Riccardi in New Boston. The next one is House Bill 1583, and this would increase base adequacy to the tune of $1.15 million in Goffstown. Again, this passed the House. It's currently in the Senate. So when we talk about $1.15 million, that's 40 cents in the tax rate in Goffstown. So, this is an opportunity for folks, if you feel passionate about the tax rate, then you should contact your senator, because the House has already passed this. So it's currently in crossover status, and it is important to let your senators know if you are in favor of that. So a lot of times we talk about ways in which we can reduce spending. We talk about revenues a lot. And I have testified for some of these bills because I think it's beneficial to our community. But again, that's House Bill 1656 is for special ed, and House Bill 1583 is the one that deals with base adequacy. Thank you.
Thank you, Scott. Is there anyone else for public comment? All right, seeing none, I'm going to close public comment for tonight. And we're going to move on. We have the middle school here to give us a presentation on teaching and learning. You want to take over?
Well, we'll introduce Principal Milligan to come up to the mic, and she's got a big crew of people here, so I'll hand it off to her. Jess, welcome, and thank you for being here.
Thank you. So I have Team 7-1 here, one of our 7th grade teams. I'm going to introduce these folks to you, and then they're going to do a pretty amazing presentation on a maple sugaring unit that we did at Mountain View this year. So first we have, I don't know if everyone can see, but Jess Murray, Lori Brody, Kendra Tisbert, Derek Davis, and Mark Lacasse, and then my admin team is here as well. So I'll have Mark come up first, and he's going to start the presentation.
Welcome, Mr. Lacasse.
Thank you. Good evening, my name is Mark Lacasse, and on behalf of Team 7-1 at Mountain View Middle School, we'd like to thank you guys for giving us the time to speak with you tonight. About 6 years ago, to give a little backstory, I was at bus duty with the then Dean of Students, Mr. McMurray, and he was telling me about how he taps trees and he makes his own maple syrup. I'd never thought about doing something like this myself, honestly. Don't tell too many people, but I grew up using the fake stuff. I didn't even know what real maple syrup really was. and my mom grew up in Vermont. But anyways, I was intrigued, and I looked into it and figured out, hey, I think I could actually do this. So that February, I started tapping some of my own trees and making maple syrup. The first time I was boiling sap, I walked away at the wrong time and came back to a stainless steel pan with a hole on it and a fire, and it wasn't very good. However, things have gotten better as the years have gone on. Each year I've made more syrup, and as Dale Smith, who's with us tonight, and you'll hear from him, he says that I caught the maple bug. Now, going to education, as we all know, students learn and enjoy learning in different ways. Some students really enjoy reading and writing and math, but some students need movement to be able to keep their mind focused. With that in mind, I approached Mr. Davis, the science teacher on our team, and asked him if he'd have any interest in us doing a hands-on unit on the process of making maple syrup, and if it would fit into his curriculum standards at all. To be clear, now what's done in the classroom is important. The reading, the writing, the math, the vocab, the study skills, those are all essential parts of education. But we were excited to give students an opportunity to learn in a different way, a more hands-on approach. So Mr. Davis hopped on board right away, and we talked to Mrs. Murray and Mrs. Brody, the language arts and math teachers on our team, and asked if this could fit into their curriculum, and they thought it would, and they were excited, and this interdisciplinary unit was well on its way. We quickly understood, though, that we were not experts on maple sugaring, so we reached back out to Mr. McMurray, who's now a dean between the high school and the middle school, Dale Smith, who's here, whose son I had taught a couple of years before, and also Rick Sweeney, who couldn't make it tonight, but whose daughter teaches at MVMS. They dedicated hours of time, as well as a lot of energy and resources to have this all come together, and we can't thank you three enough for everything you did for our community and our school. So our goal from the beginning was to give students an interdisciplinary hands-on approach to learning, but then also to be able to experience the wonder of the natural world. Because who can't see this liquid pouring forth from a tree and be amazed at the fact that you can just turn this into the sweetest thing in the world? So to do this, students didn't just read about the topic, but we actually went into the woods of MBMS, we tapped our own trees, and then once the trees were tapped, groups of students went outside every single day to collect the sap, to measure the volume, to measure the sugar content within the sap, to take the temperature outside, and then also complete mathematical equations to figure out some of the conversions that were needed, and then they would dump it all into a big storage tank. At a time when the weather was getting nicer, our students were breathing in the fresh air and seeing how all the topics they were studying in the classroom actually happened hands-on. Near the end of the season, we took a trip to Mr. Smith's maple shack at Mount Cruppen Farm in New Boston. And on that day, students stacked firewood. They helped set up tubing systems in the woods. They watched the evaporator in process. They helped with the reverse osmosis, filtering, and bottling systems. They also enjoyed some amazing maple flavor food, including maple hot dogs. And each student got to take home their own small bottle of maple syrup with a logo that one of our students designed on it, Emma Chase, that represented Team 7-1. We had a logo contest and there was too many good logos, so we also made t-shirts from one of the other logos. While the weather didn't agree with us this year, which is part of the learning process, we still produced about 1 gallon of our own maple syrup. And so now we'd like to take a moment for each teacher to share how they incorporated this topic into their curriculum. Mr. Davis can come up next.
Hi, I'm Derek Davis, the science teacher on Team 7-1. A little bit about what we did in science class with this maple unit. It was kind of interesting because normally in science, while we do talk about plants and stuff and we get into cells and ecology, we tend to focus more on the animal aspect. It just seems to kind of be more natural. With this unit, it allowed us to kind of bring back the idea of the trees being part of the biological environment in which we live, and really get the kids to focus in on that and make those connections between what makes those trees and kind of what makes us. So we kind of recapped cells, kind of this whole unit really fed into our ecology unit, which is the unit that we're in right now. Kind of bringing up some kind of like husbandry when it comes into into our environment, getting kids to realize the importance of the nature in which we live. We live in a wonderful place in New Hampshire, and there's so many wonderful things around us this unit really kind of got kids to open their eyes and not just look at trees, but kind of look at the whole environment in which these trees reside. We talked about the water, the cleanliness, the pollution, the climate. It was really nice to kind of get kids excited and kind of look at the big picture about the world around them, and have them kind of open their eyes a little bit, step away from the computers, away from the textbooks, and kind of get their hands into it. I think it was kind of an invaluable lesson, and I'm really looking forward to hopefully getting to do this again next year and kind of continue to expand what we can offer these kids in the realm of science as well as the other curriculum in which we teach. So I want to bring up Mr. Lacasse to kind of show you. He's got a lot more cool toys than I do today.
I brought some props. I'll be very brief for social studies, but we looked at the history of maple sugaring, but then we also looked at the economics. So you might know and you might not care, but I do. Native Americans didn't have metal, and they were the first to make maple syrup. So what they would do is they would haul out a log, and they would take rocks, and they would heat up rocks in a fire. They'd pour the sap from the tree into the log, and then they would take the hot rocks out with antlers, put them into the sap, and then just keep doing that, and eventually they would get the sap hot enough for it to boil, and that's how they would boil down the sap. So I did my bad attempt at home to bring this into the students. They could have something to see. But we talked about the evolution of sugaring from the Native Americans all the way up to today and the systems that they have, and we got to see a very modern system with Mr. Smith. We also talked about the economics, and the students had to come up with their own maple syrup business, where they started from a mission statement to short and long-term goals, researching competitors, direct competitors, and then also taking a catalog from Bascom's Maple Farm in New Hampshire and planning out their first year budget and then how much they could make on their goals in the first year. And when they were coming up $15,000, $20,000 short, I was like, good, that's a life lesson, because that's how it's going to begin if you try that. So we had a good time with that. And I'll call up Mrs. Brody for math.
Hi. Lori Brody, math teacher on 7-1. There is a lot of math in maple sugaring. We can start with the basics, that trees are round, and we can use the number pi to help us figure out the circumference of a tree and how many taps it would take to tap the tree, because depending on the circumference, the girth of the tree, you can put more or just one. So that was the first basic thing. We were doing this coming up to Pi Day, so that was a good tie-in there. And then we also did a lot with ratios. We did water and sugar ratio, so how much water is there to sugar, and we did that with a lot of different things, but basics like syrup itself, maple candy, maple sugar. So they looked at the ratios, but that's kind of an abstract way of looking at it. So then we broke it down into cups, how many cups of sugar versus how many cups of water, and we could see that in real life. So they were able to see, wow, that's a lot of water. It takes so much syrup to make, it takes so much sap to make a gallon of syrup. So that was a big lesson for them. And then also I tied it into some different word problems, because kids always need help with word problems and deciphering them. So we used maple syrup and different things we did with the maple unit in word problems. And one thing that came up was, how big is a cord of wood? And I don't know if anybody here knows how big a cord of wood was, but we had no idea. So it is 4 feet by 8 feet by 4 feet. So it's like this table almost to the ceiling. It's pretty big. And the kids acted it out as they stood together. So that was interesting as well. But the kids really, they didn't mind doing math as much when it had to do with the maple syrup. But, they enjoyed it. I think it was a really good experience for them. So thank you for allowing us to come talk. And now, Miss Murray for language arts.
Hi. I am Mrs. Murray. I teach language arts. So we were very excited to do this unit and to get outside. When he proposed the timeline for it, we were going to be in the middle of a poetry unit. So we decided that we would use the concrete poem, also known as the shape poem, to talk about our experiences with maple sugaring. And they came out really good. Out of all the poems, I think they came out the best because they had that hands-on, experience, and it was not far removed from them. It had just been within the last couple of weeks that we had done it. So it was really easy to get them to think about things like automatopoeia, which is essentially a sound effect, right? And they would add that to the poems, and the colors, and winter's gold became a really popular phrase that was used. So I think it helped develop some writing skills, and for those writers who really struggle, especially with poetry, I think the hands-on experience and the fact that it was so close to us actually writing the poems really helped the kids kind of channel their thinking and take down some barriers and roadblocks in terms of their writing. We also read aloud the book Just Like Jackie by Lindsay Stoddard to go along with it. And we tied that into a lot of class discussions. And it's pretty cool because maple sugaring is a pretty main component of that read aloud. And so when she was describing, how they needed to boil the sap and how they needed cool nights and warm days and all these things, and my students and I were able to have really good conversations about that because that was all stuff we had experienced. So it was really cool to just see our experience brought to life within a novel as well. So I think you. Oh, I am okay. There's a video now, and we had some help. And the kids put together an awesome video and with some of their own thoughts and ideas that they wanted to share with you. So we're going to show that to you now.
Awesome. Thank you.
The maple syrup unit was different than the regular units normally in social studies class because it was more hands-on. We got to go outside and be able to touch and use the tools aside from just taking notes and watching the videos in class.
It was a lot more fun than just writing stuff down. We got to go outside and actually tap the trees and collect the sap. It's much more fun.
I really enjoyed the whole maple sugaring unit and how we took a huge break from our original learning to make time for this unit. And I really enjoyed actually being able to go outside and learn each and every step of the maple sugaring process. And I feel like a lot of kids now might have a new passion for maple sugaring unit.
It's different because we got it from the comfort of our own school and how they actually dedicated and came to our school instead of just not only taking notes, but they dedicated our trees and we got to really put our hands on. And especially for a visual learner, a physical learner, it's definitely best for that. And when we went to the sugar shack, they taught us that we were a beginner and not just a visitor. And I felt that I was very welcomed in and very into the community instead of just a student visiting their own home.
I really enjoyed how it was different from the normal curriculum. Instead of, sitting in class for a whole bunch of time and writing stuff down on paper, we actually got to, go outside and enjoy, the whole experience. It was really fun. Really enjoyed it.
I really enjoyed going to the sugar shack and being there with those people that took the time out of their actual work just for us to see it and have a hands-on experience, something fun out there instead of, desk writing and stuff.
I really enjoyed going outside and using all the tools and then going to the sugar shack and watching it done professionally, and it really showed how much time and effort was put into all of this.
I really loved going to the sugar shack itself and getting a hands-on experience on everything that sugar maple is. It was really fun to actually learn how all the product is made, and I think it was just a really good time overall in general. The first step of the mapling process is you have to identify the tree, and they have to have symmetrical leaves for it to be a maple tree. And next you have to tap it, so you have to drill a hole into the tree, and then you're going to take a tap, and you're just going to hammer that in lightly until you hear like a certain noise. And then you're going to put the tubing in, and then it's going to go down to the bucket where all the sap will get collected. After you tap the tree, you will have to take the sap out of the bucket and bring it over to the evaporator, or if you have the money or a bit fancy, a reverse osmosis machine, which makes it easier for you to boil.
After boiling the sap into syrup, you must put it through a filtering system to get rid of all of the bad bacteria that's been floating around in there. After you get that done, you put it into a machine that bottles and labels all of your bottles to sell.
I want to thank everyone for your time and helping everyone at Mountain View learn how much work and time goes into this whole process. And I just want to thank everybody.
Thank you for dedicating your time to Mountain View and letting us come to your sugar shack.
Thank you for letting us go to your house and see the live motion and showing us how to do it in person.
Thank you so much for everything that you've done for us and for showing us the whole process and teaching us little steps and things that are super important when you're saying. So I really thank you guys for that. Thank you so much for all the time and dedication you took out of your own job to give us a good experience.
Thank you for your dedication to letting us go to your sugar shack. I know there was a lot of kids there, but it was really an experience. So next time we come, make sure you have that cotton candy, okay? I really thank the people that took their time and money out of this just for us, and I appreciate that they taught us. Thank you for your time and letting us come over to your sugar shack, Mr. Smith, Mr. Sweeney, and all the other people who helped out. You took time out of your work job, just to introduce us to how to do it, actually see it physically instead of just looking at a piece of paper, and who actually let us show us the process, try all the food, and I like the maple hot dogs.
I just want to say thank you for letting us go to your home, letting us take time out of your actual work time when you could have been boiling a lot more sap than us being slow. And I just wanted to say thank you to everyone else who came to their sugar shack too, bringing a lot of not just the students but the Goffstown community, and it showed that that a lot of people with different jobs can come to single fun activity.
Thank you guys so much for letting us, kind of get a tour of your house and see how it's really made. I really enjoyed, just walking around. Maple hot dogs are probably some of the best hot dogs I've ever had. Thank you guys so much.
To all those people that helped us have this experience and bring us out to the Sugar Shack, thank you so much for having this experience for us.
Cool. I'd like to take a second and introduce Dale Smith, who was a gentleman nice enough to invite us to his Sugar Shack and kind of really help bring this whole lesson to life.
Welcome, Mr. Smith. Thank you.
Well, you can call me Dale, for one. I own Mount Crumpet Farm. Not sure if anybody knows where Mount Crumpet comes from, but the kids know. Something you folks should be proud of are the students that came to the Sugar House and the staff that supported them. When you have 84 children come to a Sugar House, there's lots of things that can go wrong and things that can get broken, and a lot of messes could be made. These students picked up every single piece of paper. I mean, there were lots of food items that they could try, and they left the place clean. So you folks should be pretty proud of the group that had come to the Sugar House. The staff I mean, they're right on mark. They had it scheduled for each station that we were working with, so the students knew what to expect next, and I think it went very, very well. And it all couldn't have happened without the host of volunteers that came to the Sugar House to help us. I hope you guys would consider continuing this endeavor with the students, whatever support that the school needs. I know the volunteers are there to help these children learn about agriculture, and if we can get just maybe one child interested in agriculture, even not at the home scale of planting a garden or something like that, I think it's a great win for the community. Right? It's these children got to learn outside of the traditional classroom. It wasn't a free-for-all. These students learned a lot, and I think it's one of those field trips that they'll remember for a lifetime. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Our school librarian, Miss Amy O'Reilly, came with us on the field trip, and she took photos throughout the day. So we have a really great photo montage to show you up on the screen there, okay?
Now, Mr. Davis, I think you're aware that there's not supposed to be any fun at school.
We tried to minimize it as
It doesn't look like you did. Looks like there was a lot of fun.
Yeah.
I know we're short on time, and I'll wrap this up really quickly. But I did want to say one of the biggest takeaways from this was it was so nice to see learners of all abilities, students who may not necessarily enjoy being in the classroom, fully engage in this experience, who may not like to do math, may not like to do the reading or writing, and without hesitation joined right in all aspects of this learning experience that they got to do this year. Really looking forward to growing it next year and continuing this process, and I just want to thank you guys for letting us have this time to share this with you. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you to all the volunteers and community that helped us.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well done.
Yes, that was amazing. Thank you all for coming out and showing us the videos and the pictures. The kids look like they had a fabulous time, and they'll remember it because they had the hands-on. So thank you so much for coming out tonight. Is there any questions, comments from the board? Go ahead, Nicole.
Yeah, I just want to give you guys so much credit for bringing this together. I'm sure it was a lot of work, but I heard so many of those kids say how much they enjoyed it because it was working with their hands and not just working with paper. So great job. I would love to see this expanded and continue next year and really encourage other teachers as well to sort of think like this, how we might be able to bring some of these things into the classroom.
Thank you, Nicole. Go ahead, Lil.
As a student who was lucky enough to have Miss Murray, Mr. Lacasse, and Mr. Davis, I just am filled with so much like joy and pride that I get to say that these were my teachers and they really shaped my academic experience in middle school and like helped me become the person I am. And any student who is lucky enough to have them is just going to succeed, and I just give them so much props. Yeah.
Thank you, Will. Appreciate that. Anyone else? All right, well, you guys can go home. Thank you so much.
Appreciate everybody coming.
Yes.
Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Very good.
And I can give absolute a guarantee that Mike McMurray's syrup is spectacular. Spectacular.
Mr. Bulkey, I will say that when I was giving Mr. McMurray props about his maple syrup, because I do get it every year, the truth came out, and it's actually Mr. Smith that is the master that taught Mr. McMurray what he knows. So I'm just going to put that out there, that Mr. Smith is really the brains behind it all. So.
All right, Scott, are you Megan tonight?
I am Megan tonight. Megan couldn't be here, but I am here to discuss with you the food service program and to give you a little bit of an overview. So in your packets, there are three things that Megan wanted to share with the board. First was meal participation, and the encouraging news here is that during COVID, obviously there was a challenge with meal participation, and we have seen that rebound. So as you'll see, with some very few exceptions, our participation rate at all schools, whether it be breakfast or lunch, has increased from last year. So that's good news. More students are participating in either breakfast or lunch at our schools. So that's good news. The next was just trying to project, what our financial status is for the food service program. So for those in the audience or on television, the food service program is self-sustaining, meaning that the revenues that are generated in terms of food sales and/or resources that are provided by the state or federal government, it self-sustains. They match what the expenses must match the revenues. That said, when we closed our books last July of 2023, there was a fund balance of $356,000 in change. That was largely due to the fact that during COVID, the federal government was giving greater reimbursements for meals. That has since stopped. So New Hampshire, in case you don't know this, we're one of the few states in the Northeast that doesn't offer meals to all students. So there were some opportunities there. That didn't materialize, unfortunately, in our legislature. But that being said, $356,000 fund balance. What we are projecting through the end of June is that you'll see that our revenues are going to be about $1.2 million, and our expenses a little bit more at about $20,000 more, give or take. We did have some capital expenditures. So as you know, we've had to replace equipment, dishwashers, refrigerators, etc., of about $42,000. So we're expecting an overall net loss of a little over $60,000. The important thing that I want to make mention here, that operationally, again, when you take out those capital expenditures, operationally, we're going to have a loss of about $18,000 to $20,000. We are projecting a fund balance a little shy of about $296,000 when we close our books on July 30th. What we typically do at this time of the year is we take a look at what we might need to do in terms of food prices, the meal charges that we have for both lunch and breakfast. So we have to recognize that food costs and labor costs are increasing. So when the voters approved a support staff contract, they also approved salary and benefit adjustments for our food service employees. And that contract is projected to cost us, in terms of labor costs, about $25,000 to $30,000. So that being the case, we asked Megan to look at some pricing recommendations that would account for that, recognizing that we're in challenging times. We know that we have families who might have multiple students in our schools, and that even modest increases do have a negative impact on people's ability, affordability, when you look at it over 180 days. So what you'll see here is that, Megan has made some recommendations, anywhere from 10 to 25 cents for certain meals at our schools. So what you'll see, I'm going to go through Goffstown High School, so for those folks in the audience. So lunch currently at Goffstown High is $3.65. The proposal for next year would be up 10 cents to $3.75. Breakfast is $2 at Goffstown High and would go up to $2.25. Mountain View Middle School, $3.40 for lunch would go to $3.50 for lunch, and breakfast is $1.75. It would go to $2. So you're seeing that the lunch prices, Megan's recommending a 10-cent increase, and then for breakfast, it's a 25-cent increase. So correspondingly, at the elementary level, $3.15 for lunch would go to $3.25, and then for breakfast, $1.75 to $2. And then for the adults, similarly, we have adults, teachers, and staff who participate and buy lunch and breakfast. That would go from $4.25 for lunch to $4.35, and breakfast would go from $2.25 to $2.50. So I think we're being sensitive to the inflationary pressures, but also balancing that with folks' ability. I think it's a very reasonable, request for the next school year. So we have a little bit of buffer for our capital expenditures in case those do pop up. So as much as we think that things aren't going to break down, they do. But we have enough of a buffer here that the increase will more than likely cover our labor cost increases, and we have enough fund balance so that if we are shy, let's say our participation decreases, and we fall short on our revenues, that we have enough fund balance to kind of get us through the year. But I think many folks are struggling with higher prices for everything, and this is a way of trying to make it a modest increase and not, hurt folks too much. So that's kind of where we're at, and if there are any questions, I'm hoping I can answer them, but I'm recognizing that I might not be if it's too technical.
Jared has his hand up. Go ahead, Jared.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I think this is something that you can answer, because I know it's something that you talk about every year, and it's another opportunity to just throw more information out there. How does free and reduced lunch really play into these calculations, and what could we do to ensure that people are signing up for those that qualify?
Okay, it's a great question. So our free and reduced lunch program impacts the revenues that we get that help offset the total cost. So if students and families qualify for those free and reduced lunch, those meals are reimbursable. But what happens is there are a certain component of our population that would qualify for free or reduced lunch, but they don't fill out the forms. Now, it doesn't just impact the food service and the amount that we can then get reimbursements on. It affects our adequacy.
Yep.
So one of the key components of state aid is how many students receive free and reduced lunches. So I'm so glad that you asked that question, Jared, because it impacts us in multiple ways. It also impacts us for grants. So sometimes we are applying for a grant and they want to know, what is your percentage of students who want a free and reduced lunch? So that might mean the difference between either qualifying or not qualifying. I want to stress for the folks in our community that there's only one person in the entire school district that knows whether or not you're on a free and reduced lunch, and that's the food service director. I don't know that. Superintendent doesn't know it. It's very confidential. We treat it with the utmost confidentiality. So it's so critically important that if you do feel that you qualify for either the free or reduced lunch program, that you do contact Megan Bizzara, who's our food service director, and work with her on filling out that application.
Nicole, go ahead.
Yeah, I was just in the food service app or platform or whatever it is today to add some money to the lunch account. There's a link right in there to apply. So you can do it all online now as well.
Thank you so much, Jared.
And if anyone needs help with those forms, because for whatever reason, Megan will help them as well. So anyone who needs assistance completing those forms, filling out those forms, we're happy to help you do that.
Anyone else? Go ahead, Dan.
So, on the form that's presented to us here, it talks about a financial impact per customer of $1.75 a week, but that's only for 22%. 78% only take lunch, not both, and the lunch is 10 cents. So the financial impact is like 50 cents a week.
Right.
And so I'm presuming that at some point in time, somebody's going to ask us to make motions that would do this. I'm not sure if tonight is the night, or we're doing it in a few weeks.
It really depends upon how the board wishes to proceed. A lot of times, I don't ask for a motion if you want to ruminate, if you want to think about it. But, if this is something where the board feels comfortable that this is an increase that is reasonable, then a motion is fine. Tonight, we don't have to delay it. But I always try to give the board an opportunity if they feel they want time to think about something or they have questions that we can certainly take it up at the next meeting.
Right.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Nicole.
So we're operating at a loss this year.
Yeah.
So if we were to say no to this, are there any other options? What? I'm not saying that I'd want to say no. I guess I'm just trying to put it out there what the situation looks like.
If we did not proceed with a price increase, you would just simply see probably another $30,000 added to that loss. And this is one of the pure businesses that we have in the school district, because how we operate with our general fund, we have a certain pool of money, and we have to raise that by taxation and other things. But this is a pure profit and loss business. So you don't want to have too many years where you're running a loss. Recognizing that we can sustain some modest losses for a couple of years to help families in our community as they navigate high inflation, et cetera. Can you do it year after year? No. I think that it's best. This is just me personally. I haven't shared this, Megan and I haven't talked about it, but when we do small incremental increases is a lot better than boom, we're going to hit you with 30 cents or 50 cents. So slow and steady, I think, is the better approach, but I didn't get a chance to talk to Megan about that. That's just my opinion.
I appreciate the context. Thanks.
Anyone else? Questions, comments? Do we want to do a motion tonight, or do you want to wait till the next board meeting?
I'm fine with the motion tonight.
Okay, then I'll need a motion.
Motion to approve the increases to breakfast and lunch prices as presented by Mrs. Pizarro.
Thank you, Nicole. And second by Ginny. Any further discussion? Okay, seeing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, abstaining, we're unanimous. Thank you, Scott.
Thank you.
All right, so the next is our data governance plan with Stephen.
Mr. Bourget.
Just waiting for it to connect. We gotta talk to the technology director to see if we can speed that up.
We got a guy. You want me to call him?
Yeah. Yeah. Put in a ticket.
There we go. Okay, so as many of you know, as part of RSA 18966, we have to establish a data governance plan. And as part of that statute, it has to be reviewed annually by the board. So by statute, I have to bring to you each year the changes to our data governance. The data governance plan is designed to be the procedures that govern how the school district handles data privacy and security, dealing with student data, staff data, and the web resources that we utilize to make sure that we stay within the requirements for state law. So what I've done this year is we have just a few small changes to our data governance plan that after I present it to the board, I'll be publishing to the website, and I'll just go over those changes. There's a short PowerPoint deck in your packet. I'll put it up on the screen for those of you in the audience and those of you at home. The changes in our data governance plan this year for revisions focuses in two areas. The first one focuses around the renewal of digital resources. So the statute requires us to vet all online applications to ensure that they meet the state's minimum standards for data privacy and security. Under New Hampshire law, I believe there's 26 cybersecurity standards that each product has to meet, and it also has to be compliant with a plethora of other laws, both state and federal. The piece that we're making edits to this year is focusing around renewals of that vetting, if you will. We have a third-party firm that we work with, TEC out of Massachusetts, that we have a subscription to, like most New Hampshire districts, most New England districts actually, where they go through and they do all the legal review of privacy policies and sign memos of understanding with these web providers. The problem we run into is when the agreement expires in the middle of the school year and their lawyers are still kind of sorting out the renewal, because sometimes that happens. We have several applications right now that are kind of in that limbo that we signed a privacy agreement with them, where I signed it representing the district, and the CEO of the company has signed it, and they're good for 3 years. And that 3 years may have started in September and would have ended in September of last year, and they're still in the renewal process. So we've put together some language in our data governance, so we have something to refer back to when people ask, well, why can't we keep using it, or what is the process for keeping to use it? So the language we're looking to put into the data governance plan is, if the memo of understanding has expired and it's still being negotiated, then the plan is to let it keep going for the current school year next year. If the memo of understanding has expired in the middle of the school year, and for some reason the district is choosing not to renew the service, then to let it carry out to the end of the school year. The last thing we want to do is, let's say we're adopting a new textbook publisher next year, to say, oh, the textbook subscription, the memo of understanding expired in March, you can't use the textbook anymore. That's not going to be a very effective use of those pieces, especially if neither party has violated the terms of the agreement. So that's the intent behind this, is if we're not renewing it and it expires during the year, then carry it to the end of the year. Now, if one of the parties violates the terms of the agreement, different story. If one of the parties violates the terms of the agreement, then we stop using the platform, we get the data purged from their system, and we find something else. So that's basically the focus of the first part of the data governance changes. Any questions on this one before I move on? The other section of edits relates to statutory changes in RSA 18970. So RSA 18970 basically puts in language that allows for digital resources that do not meet the minimum standard, but that are used in approved curriculum in the field of career exploration or technical career education, to be able to be used with written parental consent, and that written parental consent has to be stored in the student's educational record. So the intent behind the statute was for a school district to be able to use a service like LinkedIn as part of their career exploration. LinkedIn will never meet the data privacy statute because they share student information with the world. It's a social career kind of to get yourself hired. So protecting student first name, student last name, those pieces that the state has designated as personable identifiable information, they can't not release it because that's the purpose of the platform. So the RSA says that we can use it in a very specific window, but it has to be done with parental consent, and we have to have in our policy a policy that says that we have a process for it. The board may recall that in the last month you adopted policy EHAB, which had language that said in the data governance plan, we will have the process to allow this. So that's the last part of the changes that are going into the data governance plan, which is going to be Appendix P, and it's going to define the process for allowing these applications to be used. The process that I've worked on with Wendy is, first off, there's a
Jared,
piece.
hang on one second, Stephen, go ahead, Jared.
Just before we move off the slide, Steve, when we talk about written parental consent, are we talking e-signatures, or are we talking about wet signatures that have to be physically signed?
It has to be stored in the child's educational records, so I believe you can use either signature, but it needs to be a signature. I believe it needs to be a signature. It needs to go into the student's CUME file.
Okay, so this isn't one of those, we have to send in a note, handwriting it out,
No.
and then it has to be scanned. It could be through a PDF.
I have a permission slip that was provided to me by the attorney that they
Okay.
recommend we use.
Thank you.
Thanks, Jared.
So,
Okay, go ahead.
All right, so the process that we've laid out for this is, first off, there's a piece of federal legislation called COPPA. It dates back to the late 90s, early 2000s, which designates the age of digital consent when a child could consent to a platform at the age of 13. So we're going to use that as the baseline for this, and for our policy, because you're typically not going to have anyone sign up for any service below that age anyways. So that basically is going to limit us to Goffstown High School. Now, the statute says it has to be approved curriculum and approved classes. So we're looking at, for it to be approved curriculum by the board and an approved class by the board, that means for Goffstown High School, it's in the program of studies. So courses in the program of studies that are identified as career exploration or career technical education would qualify to be able to use this exclusion. Because again, the statute says approved curriculum. The course syllabus has to list that this digital platform is going to be used and how it's used. Again, it has to be part of the curriculum. The platform still needs to go through the review process. It still needs to be attempted to be vetted. And if it's gone through the review process and found that they won't sign a data privacy agreement because they can't, and it qualifies under those criteria, then the teacher must collect written parental consent using the district digital platform consent form, which is effectively the permission slip I got from legal counsel to comply with the statute. Copies of these consent forms must be stored in the child's cumulative file and retained in accordance with policy JRA, because it says that we have to store these in the child's educational record. That's the New Hampshire statute. Now, the important thing to remember is we cannot penalize students in the courses if the parents say no, because we're still providing the child an education, and the parents saying no, I don't want my child to use a platform that does not meet said data privacy law, does not mean the child can't take the class. It just means that the teacher needs to provide an alternate means for the child to get that same experience. And the other important thing is a parent who does not return the permission slip needs to be treated as no consent, because we have to collect written parental consent by statute. So those are basically the changes for our data governance. There are a few other small changes that are going to go into data governance. Primarily, it's just small cosmetic things. As the board adopted new policies, the web links to those policies changed when they got posted to the website, so obviously those web links got updated. And there were a few other small references in the appendix that talked about access and Schoology that were updated to reflect how Schoology is being used. That is the major changes to our data governance plan. The last piece I want to touch on is that long list of web applications that we go through the vetting process, just so the board can kind of see the extent of the applications we work with. Currently, the SAU with both districts has over 170 data privacy agreements or memos of understanding signed with vendors for different digital platforms. We also have 18 vendors who have chosen not to sign privacy agreements, meaning that those platforms cannot be used in district. because they've declined it either because the product does not meet the statute or that they handle the data in such a way that it's not compliant. I have some vendors who won't even look at the agreements, who say, we don't sign it, and that's that. We have 29 platforms that were reviewed, and they don't collect personal information. So those, in addition to the 170 that we have, are used in different classes. There are currently 8 agreements that will expire in the next 3 months that are in the process of being reviewed, and we have, renewed, and we have 6 agreements that have already expired that are in process, meaning that they've expired in the last 3 to 6 months, and they're hung up with legal on one of the 2 sides. Yes?
Yeah, go ahead, Scott.
On average, how many hours does it take you and/or someone on your staff to process just one of these data privacy agreements, just so that the public understands the amount of time that this compliance takes and is, for school districts?
So we pay a firm that does a lot of the heavy lifting. So we pay a rate of $1.10 per student for this firm to do the work. I can tell you that being copied on the email chains on some of these, the work that they do on it, we're talking hours upon hours upon hours, especially with the red line legal agreements of trying to find that spot that both the legal team is happy on their side and it's in compliance with the state law. My side of the piece, I'm going to say I'm probably on a typical web application, 5 to 8 hours per application, assuming that we don't get a bulletin on the product that involves a lot more lifting on my side.
Yeah, I only raise that because when we have our staff meetings, the time spent, not just on data governance and IT security and the compliance time is it's incredibly challenging. So when, I've been someone who's been to the State House quite a bit this year, we passed these laws, but the burden to comply with this and, but Stephen, you kind of glanced over, we have to have a parental permission slip, and if we don't, someone has to send it out, someone has to then retrieve it. You talked about adding it to a CUME file, but yet we want to be electronic, and can it go in Power School or Schoology? Can't it? Does it have to be, a real signature or an electronic signature? These things take hours upon hours upon hours, just so that we can use one system.
One application.
One application. And if we don't get it right, there's other consequences.
There are.
So I just wanted to raise that, especially with so many people here and maybe people watching on television, that the level of compliance needed for school districts is just as much, if not more, than in the private sector. And I'm someone who worked in the private sector. It's incredible what the due diligence that we have to do now. And getting legal involved on some of these, it's a lot.
Thank you, Scott. Go ahead, Retta.
To add to that, though, I think the issue of privacy and security is so important now for any business or organization that it's an area that everybody has to spend time with, because data is being used in ways that it's never been used before.
And that's why we have to say no a lot of times to our staff and our educators, because they won't sign the data privacy agreement, and we can't put ourselves in a vulnerable position where somebody wants to use a program that might be great educationally for students, but the entity won't sign it. So it happens.
And we do have some applications, so the state law does give us an alternate avenue for certification. It is significantly a lot more work, and it's significantly a lot more expensive. We have done it with a few applications in the past. Effectively, the state has released 4 cybersecurity frameworks that the product must meet, which has involved on some products getting an attorney to go through all of their terms of service, privacy agreements and whatnot, to align them to those cybersecurity standards to see if they're compliant. We have that firm typically do that on the higher demand products. I just recently had one done with ChatGPT. Nowhere near close.
Yeah.
What about Google?
Google was another one that did not sign the privacy agreement. We had the terms of service reviewed, and I got a report back of this is what you have to do in order to make the system meet the minimum standards to be able to use it.
Go ahead, Retta.
Is there any initiative with school districts, either in New Hampshire or across the country? A lot of these apps are being used by school districts. I know in higher ed, it is standard, it's the same thing that they have to do, and I've heard talk about collaborating on the commonly used apps.
So the consortium that we pay into, TEC, they represent about 60 to 70% of the school districts in New Hampshire, Maine, Massachusetts, Vermont, Rhode Island, and New York. So they're the ones who do our agreements, and they do a 6-state agreement. There are about 26 states in the U.S. that have laws similar to New Hampshire. We use a national data privacy agreement with those firms. So the way it works is you have the agreement, the National Data Privacy Agreement, and then each state has an exhibit that gets attached to it. So if you're signing for Illinois or California, you're going to have the Illinois or California exhibit on it, which means that if New Hampshire wants it, the only piece that may be contested is the New Hampshire exhibit, which is the pieces that New Hampshire law has that don't fit into the regular agreement. I do have products that are vetted for every other state in New England except New Hampshire because it doesn't meet one or two of the New Hampshire requirements.
Thank you, Retta. Go ahead, Brian.
So you had a technology committee meeting about this.
Yep.
Was the technology committee in support of the changes to the data governance plan?
It was unanimous.
That's good to hear.
Thank you, Dan. All right, does anybody else have any questions, comments? So do you need a motion from us to approve this? You're good?
The statute is just it has to be reviewed by the board
Okay.
annually.
Perfect.
Right, so it doesn't, but does our,
Do we need to make a motion that we reviewed it?
this was for the chair, did our, not our rule,
Policy.
it's policy indicate that we just review it, or does it say review and approve?
Nothing says approve, not in
No,
our
I don't
policy
think
nor
it
in the
was
statute.
approved.
Okay, for the data governance
Yeah,
plan.
correct.
Okay.
So the board originally approved it when we
Yes.
first adopted the data governance plan. You
Yes.
had to approve it. But I
Yeah.
think after that initial approval, it's just annual review, right, Stephen?
It's annual review, yes.
So we could actually have it completely wiped out, and it could just say to vote, and it would be okay. Well, no, because we still have to follow the law, but, okay, that's kind of weird, because usually it's bring it to us and we
And approve.
and approve it, so.
Yep.
Could I ask that we look at that particular policy to see whether it should?
Yeah, can I ask
Oh,
Shane?
that's right, I'm looking at the wrong person, there you go.
Of course.
Thank you, sir.
Of course, Dan. We'll just have to remind, he needs to put it in the queue.
Yeah.
Data governance is dictated by policy EHAB.
Yep. Anything else from board members? All right, Stephen, thank you so much. Go home.
Thank you, Stephen.
All right, moving on. So now we're going to approve the April 15th school board meeting minutes. Did everybody take a look? Anybody have anything? I'll need a motion if everyone's good.
Motion to approve the minutes of Monday, April 15, 2024.
All right, Ginny makes the motion. Do I have a second?
I'll second.
Oh, by Retta. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, abstaining, we're unanimous, so it's 8-0-0. So now we're getting on to the committee, A and F. Dan?
Bruce.
Or Dan,
Or Dan,
Scott,
whoever.
whoever's, Dan, go ahead, manifest.
Yep, A and F had a meeting tonight, and we would like to make a motion that we approve a total manifest in the value of $2,992,038.44.
Thank you, Dan. Do I have a second?
Second.
By Nicole. Go ahead, Dan.
Payroll, taxes, benefits, $2.4 million. We had some sped activity. The big one that Shows up, of course, as Seven Hills, which is a residential out-of-district placement that is a 24/7. That's $52,000. Boothby, which is a SPED contracted servicer for $5,000. Crest Collaborative, out-of-district tuition, $11,000. The Durham School Services is our in and out-of-district transportation just for special ed. That's about $130,000. The Home for Little Wanderers, out-of-district services, again, $12,740. Jessica Fermet for some contracted services, about $15,000. Johnson ABA Consulting, about $7,500. And the Strong Foundations, $5,000 and change. Some general expenses we paid Amazon $8,400 for some books, equipment, supplies. The budget document technology, this is our copier service, our managed printing, and this is a quarterly for about $12,000. Eversource, electricity, and all the units that we paid, $28,800. These are rough numbers, by the way. Dead River Company, about $20,000 for propane. Goffstown Truck for our regular ed transportation, about $104,600. GovConnect, which is IT equipment, $5,000 in Little. Impact Fire Service, which we seem to be seeing a lot of, that we're probably going to be diving into a little later. This is for fire alarm, sprinkler maintenance and repairs, $8,800. Teachers Curriculum, that's the name of the vendor for GHS Social Studies Curriculum. That's the online thing that we did a transfer several meetings ago, $49,600, and bought some food for $22,600. Oh, also liquid, including chocolate milk, $22,611.
Thank you, Dan. Does anybody have any questions, comments? All right, I have a motion, I have a second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, abstaining, we're unanimous, so it's 800. Okay, Scott?
All right,
Love to
so
pass it on.
we've been talking a whole lot about the EMC project. Now have a dedicated binder to this project. So I want to give the board an update, and I have spoken with a few folks like Jared and Dan about updates a couple of weeks ago. But a couple of, we are going to be financing this lease purchase through the Bank of America. That'll be the financing entity. The interest rate that we had initially shown you in the proposal was 4.55%. It did tick up a little bit, so we did lock in at 4.71%, and that is good through our anticipated closing date, which will be at the end of the month. What I wanted to share, a couple of things, with the board. One is I wanted to clarify, and Jared and I had a budget committee meeting a couple of weeks ago, and I'm not sure if I'm stealing your thunder.
Go ahead.
Okay, so we did explain this project in great detail. I think the budget committee spent like at least 20 minutes, maybe 30 minutes on this, so I explained it to them. And I was telling Jared afterwards, I thought maybe I explained it better at the budget committee than I did here at the school board. But the premise of this lease purchase is that there are energy savings and reduced costs of repairs and maintenance that will largely pay for the financing of this project. So when we have, as an example, when we put 4 new boilers, energy efficient boilers at Goffstown High School, the assumption is that our propane costs are going to go down. Consequently, when we put LED lighting in all of our schools, we're going to see less electricity costs. But what I shared with the budget committee, I want to reiterate to the board, is that I wanted to remind everybody that when we did our budget for next fiscal year, we had well over $100,000 in increased costs for electricity, propane, maintenance, repairs at all of our schools. That budget failed. So that $100,000 is still kind of baked in to what EMC did in terms of their cost calculation. So what I clarified to the budget committee is that they're not going to see, neither will the school board see, a dollar for dollar decrease in energy repair and maintenance lines that will cover the cost of this annual lease payment, because we have to make up about $100,000. We still have those expenses. So they understood that, but I wanted the board to know, and I want the community to know that we're going to get tremendous benefit out of this project. You know, just the lighting alone is going to be something that's going to increase the educational environment, but we're going to see energy efficiencies and some reduced maintenance costs and repairs, et cetera, but it won't be dollar for dollar when we do our budget. So I just wanted to clarify that. The other important piece that I wanted to share with you that came up in my discussion with EMC and Bank of America was that EMC has calculated that they believe, based upon all the current incentives and rebates, that we will get about $500,000 in this to reduce the amount that we have to finance. On our conference call, I asked the question, what happens if Eversource's program is underfunded or they can't give us the $500,000? Let's say it's only $350,000. Well, the answer was, you have to come up with it. To which I advised Bank of America to not have us finance $2.85 million, but to finance $3 million. It gives us $150,000 of a buffer should an incentive go away. We don't think that's ever going to happen, but I also don't want to have to come back to the community and the board and say, hey, we got to come up with $150,000. The good news is that Bank of America explained to us that if we realize all of those savings, those incentives, two things can happen. One, they can either re-amortize our lease purchase, meaning that the price will go down every year, or we can apply that money to the first payment. So we have options. It made sense to go this route to give ourselves that cushion just in case, because I don't want to go back to this board or the budget committee or the community to say, oh my God, we didn't get what we thought we were going to get. So it gives us a little bit of a hedge, in that respect. So those were really the big updates. There are a list of 20 due diligence items that we have. Laura and I think, have tackled most of them. So we've got a couple of things to do, but we are anticipating to close right before Memorial Day. I think we're going to close on this. So the way that also works is that that $3 million will get deposited into an escrow account, which will gain modest interest during the period in which we do our construction, which hopefully will be through, let's say, September, October. And then payments will be made through an escrow account to the contractor, which is EMC. So overall, it's going well. Tons of legal paperwork, et cetera. Our legal counsel has reviewed all the agreements, so far, and changes that they requested were made by Bank of America on the financing instrument, and they also agreed at EMC. We wanted some changes there. Our attorneys did, and they all agreed to that. So, knock on wood, it's going well. We do anticipate a start of this project the day school closes. So June 18th, I think, is when we want to get into Goffstown. What? 18th. That's when we want to get in and start the boiler work. So that's the update, on that. There is a requirement from Bank of America for the board to adopt a resolution. It's one of the parts of the due diligence. God bless you. It's one of the aspects of the due diligence, and I think you were provided a copy of that, and I know that our A&F committee talked about it, and Dan, I'll turn it over to you.
Yeah, we did talk about it, and I think we agreed to it. Did you guys get a chance to read it? I mean, it's a lot of legal whereases and stuff.
Yeah, we received it via email as well, so.
And if everybody's good with it, I have a motion for us. Let me make that motion. I'd like to make a motion that we adopt the lease purchase resolution as presented, authorizing up to $3 million of financing for what is known as the EMC project, which further designates the superintendent and business administrator to act as our authorized representatives, and further requests that the full resolution be printed in the minutes.
All right, thanks, Dan. Do I have a motion? Do I have a second?
Second it.
By Jack, I heard Jack's voice. Any further discussion? Go ahead, Retta.
I just have a question, Scott, about any kind of reporting, because we're gonna, we gain savings by the decrease in, the rates and saving energy and maybe the rebates, which is not a guarantee, but, something that is likely to happen. Does EMC provide a report at the end that shows us, how much we spent and how much we saved?
I don't think so. I will ask them. I wanted, unlike some other performance contracts where you kind of pay in and out the nose for them to guarantee that you're going to see X dollar amount savings or kilowatt, et cetera. These are projections. So we did enter into one of these with Honeywell. Two of them. You pay quite a bit for them, and there was some, I believe in retrospect, there was a little bit of flaw in that because it was not based upon kilowatt hour or therms for natural gas, et cetera. It was really based upon dollar amount. So when we recognized really good energy agreements, whether it be electricity or propane, that was kind of, they're saying that it was maybe, the savings was a result of their program, when it was, might have been more a result of just really good commodity buying, okay? That said, I will follow up with EMC. The one thing that we do on our side, Retta, and for the board, is we do take a look at the gallons of propane used at all of our schools, and we pay the bill. In this case, our vendor is Dead River. When we get the bill, we enter it into a spreadsheet, so we kind of track from year to year how many gallons of propane are used and the dollar amount that we spend. So we should be able to track that. We have that data for 3 years now. We're doing the same thing for kilowatt hours on electricity. That we started last year, I think, last year. So we should have, we have the baseline data. So when we do pay these invoices, we are entering that in. So if they can't provide it, we have some internal data or metrics to take a look at that. I will share, full disclosure, that we had a project in New Boston which was similar, where we did the lighting, but we also put these VRF units, which provided supplemental heat and air conditioning, and we didn't, the air conditioning and the supplemental heating kind of ate up a good chunk of what we were saving on the lighting, Now, the outcome is that we have awesome lighting in the New Boston Central School, and now staff has the ability to change the temperatures in their building, and it's more of a comfortable, well, once we figured out the systems, but it's a better learning environment, so that's a big positive. But we'll be able to take a look back to see, okay, on the gallons used of propane, the kilowatt, that, did we get what we thought we were going to get?
And I guess that's more, over the years, we're going to forget about this next year. We're looking at the budget. That's kind of hard because the price
I
goes
also
up
want to
and
share
down.
with the board and the community that this is not like, it's not so easy, because what EMC projects, if you read the report, I think it was 3% increases in, let's say, electricity. If we get a flat electricity rate, that's just us doing a good job, as we were able to get a 5-year, agreement on electricity, or if we buy futures for propane. So I don't want to come back in 3 years and say, oh yeah, you didn't hit the target. I mean, it's a little complicated, but I'll leave it at that.
It's just a matter of, was this a successful strategy overall, and how do we know it?
Right.
Thank you, Retta. All right, so I have a motion, I have a second. Is there any further discussion? Okay, seeing none, all those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, abstaining, we're unanimous, 800. Go ahead, Scott.
The other one I wanted to share with you is that we did talk in non-public session about our school transportation contract, and I just want to disclose in public session that I have been negotiating with our current provider and had discussions with another provider. And at this point, probably at your next meeting, I'm still in negotiations with our current provider. I'm gonna ask the board to waive your purchasing policy, so that officially I can sign off on a negotiated agreement. I am meeting Thursday with our transportation, provider with respect to try to finalize those details. So I just wanted to keep you posted on that. And then the last one was our capital improvement plan. As I shared in the A&F committee, the timing of the town's capital improvement plan process requires us, we had about 2.5, 3 weeks, I think, from the time we got the email. It's due this Friday. So we have had discussions at the SAU level, administration level, about what that capital improvement plan will look like. So here's some good news. Good news is that we had 105 line items on our CIP last year. We're down to 81. We may add a few more, but with our EMC project, that took care of a lot of our boilers, heating controls, lighting, okay? Steve getting those SAFE grants took a lot of the surveillance camera replacements. Those are done. So we have been able to chip away nicely at the CIP. In reviewing what our strategy was, and this came out of our school board retreat, I guess that wasn't as exciting as maple sugar. When we talked in our school board retreat, we talked about a municipal lease this year and the potential of a bond next year. It was our administration's thought process that, given the fact that we had a default budget last year, given the fact that we were able to accomplish a decent chunk of things through this municipal lease, that we would defer the bond for another 3 to 4 years. Recognizing that the year after next is a teacher contract, and then the year after that is a support staff contract, and then the year after that would be another, I guess I would call it a window, 28, 29, where that's when we would entertain a bond for things like the roadways and the pavement. There's a lot of pavement that has to be reclaimed, whether it be our parking lots or our roadways. Mountain View is a great example of that. Roof sections, bathroom renovations, things like that. And then if we want to discuss a new school, again, that would be the year. So we talked about it at A&F as well, and we thought that to get maybe the board's concurrence on this, because we have to submit it by Friday. We typically talk about this at the retreat, but by then it's almost too late. So if the board felt comfortable with us, where we would have done it next year, us deferring it to 28, 29, then that kind of gives us our marching orders to put those items, like of what I just mentioned, in that year versus next year.
Yeah, and this is what A&F recommends.
Yes. Unanimous decision again.
Unanimous decision.
Is it just these items on the 4/15/2024 list that are being?
No, that has nothing to do. That's
Okay.
not it.
So, what are some of the items that are getting pushed out?
All of the pavement. So almost every school, with the exception of Glen Lake, almost requires us to, if you've seen they call it alligator cracking, where you can't crack seal this stuff anymore. Maple Avenue, this high school, Mountain View in particular, you have to literally rip up that.
So the items you were just mentioning were the ones getting pushed out, like
Yeah.
the roof pieces? and
Yes,
stuff.
these are big ticket items, very, very big ticket items. Septic at Mountain View, another one. So we're talking.
Which is under the parking lot.
Under the parking lot.
So it's not a
one of the
simple septic
leach fields is
repair.
under the parking lot.
Under the parking lot.
You're talking in total, I don't have the numbers in front of me, but my guess would be, this could be like $10 to $20 million of projects in that bond, not including if you wanted to build a school. So, it's not insignificant. You're talking about roofs. You know, we have some asbestos abatement here at the high school that still has to get done. Some flooring,
We have
corresponding flooring.
asbestos abatement that needs to happen at Bartlett.
At
that needs to
Bartlett,
happen
Maple.
At Maple.
Yep, so we've got, it's quite a bit. It's, that one I apologize, Nicole, that I skipped over it.
This is the
but-
new projects, right? Like that.
Yeah, those are ones that I think we might not bond, but we might try to use the capital reserve fund for.
Got it. Thank you.
And I should have clarified.
The
that.
timing on the
Apologies.
capital reserve process is hard for us because it starts really in June.
Yeah,
And-
our presentation is June 20th.
Right.
And that's like right around the same day as, or that is, I believe it's 3 days after your retreat.
Yeah.
So it doesn't give
So
us
we
enough.
do plan on talking about
Yeah.
some of these things on the retreat, doing some longer range planning, talking about budgets, some of those things, but unfortunately, we're going to be well underway.
Yeah.
With CIP. It's already submitted at that point.
Does anybody have any questions, comments for Scott? No? Okay. So any more?
That was it. I gave you, I don't have to go over it, but I did give you an updated printout of our capital reserve fund and what that looks like, because the board did take some actions. So that just gives you what our projected balance will be come next fiscal year, once we put that deposit of $250 in.
Right.
So that's it.
Okay.
Thanks.
Thank you, Scott. All right, moving on. Budget Committee. Jared?
I'll try not to cover some of the things that Scott already talked about. The Budget Committee, we had our first meeting, they elected their officers. Just to note, Jack, Samantha Kearns is going to be the CIP rep from the Budget Committee. She was the CIP rep last year as well. She's very engaged in the process, so definitely a great partner to have as part of the CIP process that you'll be working on. They did talk about, as Scott said, we did mention that, understanding that we're in a default budget, the board still wants to move forward with some of the things that we needed to do, like the reading curriculum and other activities, and talking about how we have to cannibalize other lines in order to make sure that we drive resolution to those things. There was general consensus and agreement to what we said on that. We did talk about our new principal that has been approved for the elementary school. There was some conversations about, well, are we going to be increasing headcount? We maintained that, no, we're at level headcount with having the vice principals in place at our schools as well. That was one of the concerns that they had. One thing Scott didn't mention, and I think he just didn't remember, but it was a large conversation as part of the municipal lease program. They asked how we're paying for it, specifically if we're using any of our CRF. I did say that all options are on the table because we haven't really discussed that as a group. But some members, and a majority of members, in my opinion, were really hinting how much of the CRF we're going to be using for this on a regular basis. Of course, I didn't make any commitments to that since we haven't had any conversations. But that was one of the things that, even though that we're talking about reduction in other lines through savings, there are those members that really want to drive the CRF because we are picking off things out of our CIP, and as a former member would say, our mini CIP as well. Other than that, we do know that we're going to have another meeting sometime before the end of our fiscal year. There's also general consensus that when we go through and do our budgeting, that of course they would join with us as we kind of listen to the presentations if we so ask them to. So they're in agreement with that as well.
Great. And you don't know when the next meeting will be?
I tried to look on the calendar, it's not posted
Okay.
yet, and I didn't write it down.
Okay, sounds good. All right, PNC. Nicole.
All right, so we met just before this meeting at 6 o'clock, and first up, it is Teacher and Staff Appreciation Week, so big thanks to all teachers and staff in the district. We're very grateful for everything you do. We will hopefully have a breakfast that's coming out for you this week. Each school has a different day that it will be at that school, and look out for a video from the board. We also briefly discussed scholarships, which we will be discussing in non-public again tonight. We looked at a final clean copy of our mission vision, at least from our perspective, that we will be bringing to the full board next meeting, so that you'll have a couple meeting cycles to review it before the retreat, at which point we'll have a little bit more of a discussion and make sure we finally get a copy. And one of the last things we talked about was National Night Out in August. We were talking about perhaps participating in that event like we do at the Spring Fest, because it is such a great community event, an opportunity for us to be involved with the public, visible, accessible. So more to come on National Night Out. And our next meeting will be the first June meeting, but I unfortunately don't have that date in front of me. 6 p.m. here in the Media Center.
Great, thanks, Nicole. All right, policy review. Shane.
Thank you. Policy has not met since this board last met. We will meet next Monday, May 13th at 5:30 at the SAU offices. There are a couple of second read policies that are up for adoption this evening, so we'll get to those later on. So we will meet next week.
Thank you, Shane.
Thank you.
C&E, Ginny.
C&E has not met since our last meeting, and we will meet on May 13th at 7 p.m. at the SAU.
Thank you. Technology Committee, Dan.
Technology Committee met this evening. Much of what you heard on Mr. Bourgette's presentation we did discuss. We also went into non-public for an hour and a half, and talked about the cybersecurity audit that the district had gotten. And I can't tell you anything about it because it's non-public and we're at a public setting. If you have questions, I think it would be something that we could go into non-public and talk about. If even wanted to hear anything. Nothing real bad. Things he is working on. One question I do have for the committee or the chair is, you know, all of our votes are unanimous. I mean, it's unbelievable, but there's only one of me. Is there any reason why we didn't have more than one person on technology that we can think of?
I have no idea. Do you
I'm
want a
wondering
second
if
person?
Us as a group, I don't know if Mrs. Moran knows the history about whether or not we want to have more of a committee style. We meet periodically, maybe 4 times a year. It's not like we do for some of the other committees, so it might be something if there are other interested parties that we could have a couple more people join us and have more robust, because me as a technologist and Steve as a technologist, it's not like we're getting the questions from other
people,
sides that we can try to anticipate, but I think we might benefit from having others.
As I recall, when the law was first passed that required us to create the data governance plan, we had to have a board member on that committee. Because you were part of that, Dan. When we wrote the plan, you were at the table for every one of those meetings. I think when the plan was finished, that we just continued that small technology committee mindset. But I think there's no reason it couldn't be.
This is also previous years. I think we go back several years that, you know, I used to meet with the previous
Mr.
Geralman many, many years ago. It's just that we don't have them as periodically as we would A&F and PRC and you know, C&E and all of PE, PC. We have so many acronyms, I'm sorry. As the other one, I didn't want to forget anybody, and I probably could have.
Yeah, we can look into it. I don't see why not. If anybody's interested, let myself or Dan know. Because you've been meeting more recently just because
we
of all
have
this
been, because
stuff,
there's a
but-
lot of things that are going on, and as the need arises, and we have, and some of the things we can talk about is, in order to adopt and mitigate some of the findings, we're talking hundreds of thousands of dollars, if not getting into 7 figures. And we all know we can't get there. We have to get there slowly, and we have to start chopping. But the other thing is, who's going to do it? I mean, it's nice to say, hey, do this, but you also have to say, hey, I also have to keep it up, you know?
Yeah. So if you have any questions about the meeting and length of time and stuff, reach out to Dan and we can find out. I don't see why we couldn't add more people to it.
Yeah, excellent.
If you need a Luddite to ask questions.
Questions are fine.
Good questions.
We met this evening at 4.
Yeah.
And I did that on purpose so that we could do the 4 o'clock, then the 6 o'clock, then the 7 o'clock, and it's only
Right.
one day out, so to
Yep.
speak, rather than
Okay.
kind of worked.
Yeah.
Thank you.
All right, thanks, Dan. All right, superintendent's report. Good stuff.
Just a few quick things tonight. So I wanted to let you know we are looking for a board member, and I think I've got all this information correct. Mrs. Moran left me a note. There's a retirement party for Mountain View Middle School staff. There are several retiring, and they're looking for someone to give out the bells. The date of this is Thursday, June 6th at 4:40 at Casey's Rib Shack. So I don't know if barbecue might incentivize you, but anything that involves brisket is a good thing in my world. So if anyone would be available on June 6th at 4:40 to go to Casey's Rib Shack and give out bells, please let me know.
And if you haven't done bells, they're a lot of fun.
In the mountain, no slight to the other schools, the Mountain View they have great retirement parties.
So let you know, let Denise know, let Wendy know.
I would say
Wendy?
Wendy sounds lovely, thank you. So if anyone has the ability to be there, and if not, then likely Mrs. Kohler will give the bells out on your behalf, but we always like to invite board members if someone might have the ability to attend. We did get confirmation from St. A's that our retreat will be at St. A's in the Institute on Politics, so that same room has been confirmed. As this is our first meeting back after vacation, I hope all students and staff had a great vacation week and a half, 2 weeks ago, and that I hope everybody has a good last stretch of the school year and finishes strong. And my last piece is we did a meet and greet for Mr. Demers with the Maple Ave faculty. Was that last Thursday, Wendy? And it was a lovely time. We had a nice session with Mr. Demers, had the chance for him to get to know folks, and they did rib him a little bit, which was nice to see. And that was all I had. I would stop there and ask if there are any questions. Wendy, did I miss anything? Anything from your end that we talked about?
I don't believe so.
Can we have the time for the retreat and the date?
The retreat is...
Did you guys figure that out yet?
It's on our,
I just want to, just in case board members don't have it written down. I think it's at 3, right?
So it's Monday, June 19th.
Mm-hmm. Is it 3 or
17th?
3:30?
So I'm looking at the calendar, which should say 17th, but the agreement
Yeah, it's the 17th.
says June 19th. So the agreement from St. A's is wrong, so we don't want to execute this one. Oh, wait, it's
June.
written in 2 places. So one place, it's Monday, June 17th, but I don't know why, they must have made a typo on the one thing, but it is from 2:30 until 9.
So 2:30.
That's what time we booked the room.
Okay,
So I think we typically start at 3.
3.
So
Okay.
we'll get there at 2:30, we'll set up, we'll make sure
Okay.
that if we need technology or the configuration of the room, et cetera, but it will be Monday, June 17th, from 3 until we
9,
finish.
Yeah.
And
And
this
usually,
is at the Institute.
Yeah.
It's
Same
the
place as
Institute
well.
of Politics in the west wing, which is the left side of the building if you're standing in the parking lot.
and Jack, usually emails go out with directions, or you can follow one of us or something. It's.
You familiar with the building,
I
Jack?
know the way to get there.
You know where it is, right?
All right,
Okay.
perfect.
The dam meeting.
Yeah. All right, anything else for
A
Brian?
meeting about the dam, not the dam meeting.
All right, so you're set?
I am, thank you.
All right, so Shane, old business, second reads.
Yep, so we have 2 policies that are up for adoption tonight. Second reads, we have BCA, which is the ethics policy statement, which we discussed at our last meeting. They're just 3 changes, which are in yellow there. So if everyone's good with those, we need a motion to adopt.
I'll need a motion. Go ahead, Retta.
I'll make a motion to adopt policy BCA as presented.
Thank you. Do I have a second? By Ginny. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, abstaining, we're 800. Go ahead, Shane.
All right, and the last policy we have up for adoption tonight is JLCF, which is the wellness policy. Again, we talked about this at our last meeting. There are some changes that are represented in yellow, and some strikeouts, and some red text as well. So if no one has any questions or comments on that policy, we need a motion as well.
I'll need a motion. Go ahead, Retta.
I'll move that we adopt policy JLCF as presented.
Thank you. Do I have a second?
Second.
By Shane. Was that you, Shane?
Yep.
Any further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, abstaining, we're unanimous, 800. All right. Thank you, Shane.
Thank you.
All right, impact fee legal opinion.
Yeah, so I think Scott and I will tag team this together. I'll give a little bit of an intro, and then I'm going to hand it off to Scott. The board will recall that the town hired a vendor to do a study of the impact fee program here in Goffstown. They hired Mark Frugere, who is a town planner from Milford, and he has been working on this project. As part of the project, we were approached by Mr. Frugere, and Mr. Gross and I met with him a few months ago, and we had some preliminary conversations about impact fees and the scope of the impact fee program here in Goffstown. There were some questions raised and being asked about the program, and we felt it was important for us to get a legal opinion to make sure that we're appropriately advocating for the continuation of the impact fee program. So with that, you should all have a copy of the legal opinion from Attorney Gordon Graham, and I'll hand it off to Mr. Gross.
Thanks. So for the public's benefit, this legal opinion was discussed in a non-public session at the last school board meeting. And the board subsequently voted to release this and make it a public document. We have since shared this legal opinion with the town administrator, Derek Horn, and town hall staff. So they're aware of it, and I think we're gonna have a meeting with them hopefully this week. So one of the questions that came up in our 2 conversations with Mr. Frugere was what was needed by the school district, or in the case, the town, in order to, I guess, qualify to collect impact fees or school impact fees. And the questions that arose was what level of specificity was needed in order for the town of Goffstown to collect a school impact fee. The comments that were made by Mr. Frugere was that we needed either architectural or engineering studies or an approved plan, something very, very substantive. It had long been our understanding that as long as the school district had appropriate documentation in a CIP for what would be uses of impact fees. And keep in mind, impact fees are for the increased costs associated with the development. So these are impact fees of growth. So in the case of, if we have increased growth, and hypothetically, I'll use one school as an example. If we have Maple Avenue School that has brick and mortar capacity for 450 students, hypothetically, even though we have close to 550. The increased growth, you can't, if we were to build a new school, that 450 is not increased capacity, that's existing capacity. But anything above and beyond that 450, the cost of the square footage to build a new school, that you would be able to apply impact fees for. if we were to expand, put an addition on a building, those are kind of the easier ones. So, case in point would be the, although we didn't use impact fees for it, was the addition that we did to Glen Lake School, right? That being said, there was a lot of things that Mr. Fougere alluded to that we just didn't, we didn't think we needed to go through the expense of hiring an engineering firm and doing all this due diligence when all we really needed to do was a more basic type of endeavor. And the legal opinion, I'm just going to read it for the public's benefit. I'm going to read the last paragraph, which kind of summarizes it. In summary, the methodology for assessing impact fees charged to new construction in Goffstown is being reevaluated. The town's existing procedures and methodologies do not require the district to pay consultants or architects for the production of school construction designs, plans, or for the compilation of cost estimates for future projects prior to the imposition of school impact fees, and such a requirement is not a precondition to the legal imposition of impact fees. Nothing in the law governing the assessment of impact fees has changed to impose such a requirement. Capital improvement plans may, but are not required, to contain cost estimates. And it is clear that there are multiple legitimate and acceptable methodologies that may be used to calculate projected costs for the assessment of impact fees, including, but not limited to, comparisons to similar recent projects, insurance replacement cost data, and statewide construction costs per square foot compiled by the New Hampshire Education Department and others. Approved construction plans and specifications and professionally developed cost estimates are not required by law for the valid assessment, collection, and disbursement of impact fees. So that's really the nuts and bolts of the legal opinion. So we will meet with the town to discuss this. The importance here is that impact fees are collected by the developer at the time that the certificate of occupancy is issued. So we have development going on Mill Street, and we have Bog Road, which will more than likely come online this year or early next year. And there are hundreds of thousands of dollars of school impact fees and town impact fees at stake. So our request of the town is continue to, collect these impact fees on behalf of the school. There's no reason not to, and that your revision to your methodology should proceed, because right now it's paused. That's kind of where we're at.
I think the big thing for us is we felt strongly that we needed the legal opinion to be able to advocate for this program.
Yeah.
And that we feel this is important for the continued ability for us to have appropriate facilities based on growth.
And it doesn't, we have enough portable classrooms
For a whole school.
almost for an entire school. So that, in and of itself, demonstrates that is the growth part, because the brick and mortar is your baseline, and the portables are your additional growth. So we already have.
All right. Anything else?
So more to come.
Okay. All right, moving on to new business. General assurance.
So what we have here, and Mrs. Kohler is ready and prepared to answer any questions that board members may have. But each year, we're required to sign off on what are called the general assurances. They're required to be signed off by the board chair and the superintendent. In order to receive any federal money, any federal funds, Title I, Title II, Title III, grants that we receive, we have to have these signed and approved by the board chair and the superintendent. So we would ask for a motion to authorize the board chair and the superintendent to sign the general assurances for FY25.
Are we supposed to have a copy of this?
I don't recall
We typically don't
It's,
provide the board with it is a
It's like 40 pages.
very, very long document, and it basically stipulates that we have to abide by every single state, federal, whatever rule.
And you can't change it.
Yeah.
So we can't come back
Yeah.
and say, we don't agree with number 17. That's not how it works. It's If you want to take the money, you sign it as it is. We have not historically provided copies of that.
All right, so we need a motion.
I'll make a motion to authorize the superintendent and the school board chair to sign the general insurances for the 2025 fiscal year.
Thank you, Shane. Do I have a second? All right, Ginny?
Inquiry.
Yes, go ahead.
Is that document located anywhere? Like, I'm presuming that every school in the
has to do it.
state, and it's the same one. Is it on the NHED website or our website or anything?
We're required to provide, we have to upload our signed copy into the grant management system.
Yeah.
I'm not sure what's available to the general public. If someone was interested and they really wanted a copy, I'm sure the department would give it to them, because it's the same for every school district in New Hampshire.
Right.
Identical.
So I'm just wondering, if it's a PDF, we can just
Yeah.
email it to all of us just to become aware. I think we've gotten it in the past.
Okay.
I mean, as a PDF or something like that, and just to scan it. And it'd be nice to have. It doesn't preclude me from voting, but it's just.
We will send it out.
I appreciate it.
Yep,
Thank you.
you bet.
All right, thanks, Dan. So we have a motion, we have a second. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, abstaining, we're unanimous, that's 800.
Thank you.
Okay. The next student meal waiver.
Yeah, so the next one is, I wanted the board to be aware, and in your individual packets, you should have received a copy of a technical advisory that is dated March 27th, 2024. Interestingly enough, this is, I believe, the only technical advisory the department has issued so far this year. And this particular technical advisory is letting school districts know that we are required to make one meal available to every student under our jurisdiction every day. So that may sound all well and good for all elementary children, all middle school children, and all high school students. But what about our half-time, 2.5-hour-a-day kindergarten program? According to this technical advisory, we are required to provide breakfast or lunch to every student, irrespective of the duration of time they're at school. So the fact that we have a 2.5-hour kindergarten program makes no difference. We are required to provide a meal to those students. We, of course, do not have a kitchen at the school. We don't have a staff to provide said food. And so one of the options that is, and by the way, this includes preschool. So preschool children who might come for a short portion of time for special education services for 3- and 4-year-old children, they're also part of this statutory requirement under RSA 189:11-A.
And it has to be during school hours and a minimum of 30 minutes.
Yep. Because we tried to say, if this would be a good, helpful thing for kids, we could do like a grab and go if families wanted to sign up and have a bag lunch available or something. That does not appear to meet the requirement. So interestingly enough, in the interest of trying to be prepared for tonight's meeting, I started the week before vacation contacting the individual listed as the consultant for the state on this. I've left multiple messages. I've not, unfortunately, been able to speak to this individual. I had hoped to get a little more support prior to coming to you this evening. There are several school districts that are struggling with this, and all the school districts are districts that have part-time kindergarten programs. So I've spoken with a couple of other local school districts who are either applying for a waiver or are figuring out how they're going to be able to do this. Mr. Gross and my assessment is that we should pursue the waiver. We think that this is going to be an incredible burden for us to be able to figure out how we're going to provide meals to every Glen Lake student, including 3- and 4-year-old children. And to that end, again, I had hoped to be able to speak with Amanda, the administrator in charge of this program, before the meeting tonight. Unfortunately, that didn't happen, but having said that, our recommendation would be to pursue a waiver. what the statute seems to indicate is a waiver can be granted, but such waiver may not exceed the period of 1 school year. So I think that this is likely a waiver that we would be granted for next school year. There seems to be conflicting elements, because one part says it can be for not to exceed one year, but then down below, it says that the waiver is granted until it's rescinded. So again, these were the reasons I reached out to the program administrator and wanted to clarify. So I don't know if we would have the ability to go beyond next year, but I do know that it would be our recommendation to at least apply for the waiver for next school year. And it seems to indicate that the state board will come to us and let us know when we need to formulate a plan, and that they have to let us know what we're going to have to do to comply with this statute. So in the meantime, again, despite having not had the chance to speak with Amanda Marshall, the program administrator, our recommendation would be to move forward with a waiver request for next school year to be in compliant with RSA 189:11A.
Go ahead, Ginny.
Would this be considered another unfunded mandate?
I tell you,
locally forced taxation.
It is, and again, a lot of these unfunded mandates are good for kids. So the mindset that we're going to make sure that there's a meal available to every kid, that's something I can get behind. But give us an opt-out process for preschool and kindergarten. I'm not asking for anything grades 1 through 12, but for having a part-time kindergarten program, this is an incredible burden for us. So this is an unfunded mandate.
And it really cuts into their education time. You know, there's coats and shoes and
and there's winter,
vacation,
right?
and there's
Yep.
and then there's a lunch.
And remember, there's also a statutory requirement that kindergarten instruction must be play-based. So, again, a lot of these statutes all have good intentions, but making them operational has costs associated with this. So, let's say we're not granted a waiver. I don't have the staff to do this. So in order to do some kind of a new meal program, I'm gonna have to hire staff that's unbudgeted, that we don't have capacity for. We don't have a kitchen. We don't have space to even do this. I would have to satellite food, probably from Goffstown High School, and transport every single day to Glen Lake to make this happen.
Go ahead, Jared.
Yeah, I'll make a motion to have our administration submit a waiver to RSA 189:11A for our Early Childhood Education Center.
Thank you, Jared. And seconded by Dan. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, abstaining, we're unanimous, 800.
Thank you. Follow up on that.
Yeah.
It's my suspicion that we're going to need legislative relief here. And I think it would be in our best interest to tackle this now, meaning that allow me or the superintendent to ask our either state representatives or our state senator to sponsor legislation that would amend the language of this RSA that would give the opt-out for school districts that do not offer full-day kindergarten. Because I don't think that, we might get the waiver 1 year, but we need to fix this statute. It's broken. So we have to seek legislative relief. We have to change the law.
I think it might make sense. I don't disagree, Scott, and your record, I think you're 2-0, if I'm not mistaken. So
1-0 right now, we still have to get to the crossover.
You've got a better, I'm 0-1, so you're better there. I think it would make sense to wait, and we can be mindful of that, but I think we should wait to pursue that until we hear back.
And then we could have new state reps and a new state senator come November anyway, so, but I think we got to keep this on the radar for legislative action.
All right, thanks, Scott. All right, moving on. Oh,
And if
go
I
ahead,
could just
Dan.
add, because we didn't, a lot of times we say, we got to provide this. This is the same principle as LE, not AL, that we do at any other school. If they want to buy it, they can buy it. If they don't want to participate, they don't have to participate. And so, just doesn't make any sense to, probably doesn't make any sense to send out some kind of survey to the parents to say, if it was offered a midday meal or whatever, that you would take advantage of that. Because at that point, we have no idea whether there's 30 kids, 100 kids, or 2. And it's not breakfast.
It can be.
It can be.
Well, yeah, but I'm saying, we wouldn't want to do both.
No, you have to do one or, right, so in the
Correct.
AM, it would be breakfast. in the
No,
PM, it would be-
AM could be lunch, because they don't get out until what time?
10:30.
Oh, wow.
10:30?
That
was 11.
11 something.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, lunchtime could be at 11,
I
and
like
so.
early lunch.
Yeah, early lunch.
Especially when it's breakfast.
Early lunch, and the next group starts at 11:30? Any time for food.
That's right.
Okay, yeah. And the other group is what, 11:30?
No,
No,
later,
it's-
after lunch.
Yeah, it's
After.
12:30,
Yeah.
12:30.
So,
yeah.
you know, it's one of those, I'm not thinking that we would do breakfast and then lunch. It would be, so why go
Brunch.
crazy?
Yeah.
You have one.
I think there's just a real
French
practical
toast sticks
nature
every
that
day.
the state should recognize for school districts
Agreed.
that don't have full-day kindergarten, that this
Yes.
is an incredible burden. And rather than reach out to the very small list of us, there are only, Scott, what are we down to? Maybe less than 10 school districts
Yeah,
that
much,
don't
yeah.
have full-day kindergarten. They could have called us. They could have called us and said, hey, how would this impact you if you had to provide lunch to your preschool and kindergarten students?
In their defense, not to be there in their defense, there's a law, somebody probably pointed it out to them, and they're doing whatever they can for
Yeah.
due diligence, because they're on the hook as well, if you think about it, because their job is to make sure that the educational laws are, and here it is. You know, I don't see anybody knocking at our door and arresting anybody either for not doing the meal, so it may not be.
It would just be me.
Well, we might visit.
You don't have to. Just
Listen.
leave, Wendy knows, just leave me there.
I tell you what, you got a party real close to where the bed, so not a whole lot of walking.
All right, let's move on. Manchester School of Technology Agreement.
Yeah, so let me give a little update on this. So we have been working with, we are part of the Region 15 Career and Technical Education grouping, and this involves the Bedford School District, the Londonderry School District, the Goffstown and New Boston School Districts, and we have an agreement with the Manchester School District through the Manchester School of Technology. So our agreement with MST is expiring this year, and we have been working with our partners in Bedford and Londonderry to develop a new 4-year agreement with Manchester School of Technology. So it's Bedford, Londonderry, Goffstown together on this. We are at the point that all of our attorneys are reviewing the agreement. So this is going to be an agreement that we are likely, again, not to have a lot of ability to influence, but Gordon Graham is reviewing the agreement, and between all of our attorneys, the attorneys are talking, so hopefully we're going to get to an agreed upon agreement. I wanted you to know that we will be asking for you, after the agreement is finished with the attorneys, for your approval of a 4-year agreement with MST moving forward. So this will be the same situation with both Bedford and Londonderry as well.
All right. Go ahead, Nicole.
I seem to remember that we've had some trouble with them not being able to find teachers for certain positions. Are we still dealing with that?
We are. So, in fact, I went and did a tour, Mr. McBride and I hadn't been to MST in a few years. So we went and did a tour 2 weeks before vacation and got to see firsthand some of the programs, particularly some of the new programs that they had. So they are having some challenges in particular areas. Electrical, plumbing, and HVAC are the ones that I think they have struggled the most with finding appropriate staff. So, but finding those is a lot like finding a physics teacher or a speech and language pathologist. It's hard to find, right? So a licensed, certified plumbing teacher, hard to find. So they have struggled. In fact, the board will recall, we did a separate agreement with Bedford that we paid for an HVAC program for about a dozen or so students through the community college system. So those students got that experience from a certified licensed instructor that they otherwise would not have had. We did request reimbursement for our costs associated with that program from the Manchester School District. And Mr. Gross and I have had a couple of meetings with them. They are considering our request. So that when we paid additional monies because they didn't have licensed HVAC instructors, we went out and bought it anyhow because we wanted those kids to have that service. Having said that, Nicole, I think that there are other programs that have a really great reputation. We saw some incredible things happening in the cosmetology program, had the chance to talk to a bunch of our Goffstown kids that were in there. Kids love the program. So they've got some really great things happening. But yes, they are definitely struggling to fill some of their open positions.
And so we still think it's the best option, even considering that situation.
Best is an interesting word. So I don't know that I can tell you that I think it is the best option. There are some pretty incredible vocational programs that one could go and see. Concord has an incredible program. I think Pinkerton Academy has incredible programming. But MST is in close geographical proximity and our schedules align. So is it the best program that we could buy? I don't know that I can give you my assurance that it is, but other programs have logistical challenges around schedules that would require a wholesale revamping of school schedules. And if you revamp the high school schedule, guess what? You have to do all the other schools because each one impacts the others. It's a domino effect. So if I were to consider a different start and end time, say hypothetically at Goffstown High School, so that students could potentially attend another vocational center, there are ripple effects that would impact all of our schools and also likely be elements that we would have to engage in some collective bargaining with our unions.
Thank you, Nicole. Good questions.
So I'm not asking for any action this evening, but I wanted you to know that this is happening and this will be forthcoming. I'd be happy to send out the draft document if you would like, but right now the lawyers are doing stuff, so I think it's going to look a little different. So if we wait another week or two, I might have the finished document that you could review at either your second meeting in May or your first meeting in June, but we would be asking for your approval of a 4-year plan moving forward. Okay. Scott, anything to add?
No, I think we're waiting just on Gordon's feedback at this point.
Okay. Any other questions, comments? Go ahead, Dan.
This is similar to the agreement we had 4 years ago, I'm presuming.
The previous agreement was a 10-year agreement.
It was, 10 years ago.
Yep, it was 10 years ago, and the agreement is essentially identical.
Yeah. Jeannie and I will remember seeing it.
Mm-hmm.
And so after we had a preliminary meeting between, it was the superintendents from the districts that we've mentioned, I met with Bedford and Londonderry. We had some proposed changes. We brought those to Manchester. They were very open and agreeable to them. Their attorney was agreeable. And then, so now we're at the point that we're just doing the final version between the other attorneys. So it will look very similar with a few changes, Dan. So I included a few things. I wanted to include notifications if they don't have certified staff for programs.
Yeah.
So we built in a new element that requires a notification so that we're informed if they can't run automotive or they can't run, a building trades class, a framing class. I want to know that. I want to know ahead of time so that we're not surprised that we find out that kids have not had qualified certified staff even though we thought they were in those programs.
Sure.
So that's an example of some of the things that we changed. So I think advantageous for us.
Thanks, Dan. Anyone else? All right. Thank you, Brian.
Thank you.
All right, moving on to staffing.
So we've got a pretty robust staffing sheet that you should all have in your packets. Mrs. Moran did provide me with a few copies. Did anybody not get this in your packets? Okay, maybe these were just extras. So we do have a few things this evening that are notifications only, one being a leave of absence, and two others being change of teacher assignments for next school year, so no action required of the board. I wouldn't typically point out things like this, but I did want to share with you that if you see the second one listed, Jessica Roy at Maple Ave, moving into a special education teacher position, I do want the board to know she is a speech and language specialist. She is an incredibly talented speech and language professional, and the Department of Education has changed the rules around her certification, and it's being eliminated. There are only, ready, 6 of these folks in the state, and we have 2 of them, speech specialists. So we've been working through, there are waivers for them, but I think Jessica is seeing the writing on the wall that this certification is being eliminated. She is also a certified special education teacher. So I just wanted you to be aware that in an environment where we can't find speech and language people to help work with our kids, New Hampshire has this unique pathway for speech specialists. There's a program at UNH that's been doing this for years, and the department has eliminated the certification. So again, I just share these things so you're aware of the challenges that we're dealing with. For your approval this evening, we have 3 administrator nominations. I will read them off. We will need to discuss these in non-public this evening, so I will not be asking the board to take action on these immediately. We'll need to wait until after non-public. But we will be bringing forth to you this evening for your consideration a nomination for Darcy Crete to be the new assistant principal at Bartlett Elementary School. Dr. Michael McMurray, who, as we've confirmed, makes incredible maple syrup, to be the Goffstown High School Dean of Students, and Dan Johnson at the district level as the behavior intervention facilitator. So we will discuss those in non-public. For your approval this evening, we have 3 teacher resignations. We will wish them well. Amy, Kevin, and Matthew.
All right, so I'll need a motion for the teacher resignations.
I'll make a motion to approve the teacher resignations as presented.
Thank you, Shane. Do I have a second?
Second.
By Ginny. Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, abstaining, we're unanimous. Go ahead.
So the next one is a teacher leave of absence, and if you look up above, you'll see this is Andrea LaFortune, and you'll see that she is taking a year leave of absence from her interventionist position to be in the reading specialist position. So this is a hard certification for us to find. So we have been working with Andrea. She's spectacular, but we need a little more time to finish up the certification. That's why this leave of absence.
All right, so I need a motion for the teacher leave of absence.
I'll make a motion to approve the teacher leave of absence as presented.
Thank you, Shane. Do I have a second?
I'll second.
By Retta. Any comments, discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, abstaining, we're unanimous.
So why, if I can ask, why wouldn't we have made an action for the leave of absence at the top?
That might have been a good move.
All right,
No, not to do this up there, but we didn't make a motion on that.
right, it was notification.
Leave of absence or notifications?
It's just a change in teacher assignment. That doesn't require you to...
No, on my
Oh.
sheet above it, there's
Oh,
a,
this, yeah, the first one, leave of
it
absence.
says Stephanie Courant,
Yeah,
Flex 3 special ed teacher. Do you have the same form we do?
yep.
Yeah.
We
Oh, I
should-
see what you're saying. Why wasn't that
Yeah,
listed
we
under the
should
above?
be-
Under the approvals.
Okay, I'm
Yeah.
sorry. I
Yeah,
wasn't following
I'm
you.
thinking, because
That's a
when we
good
passed it,
question.
I said, I thought
Yeah, we
had
should
to
approve
do
that.
leave of absences.
All right, so let's approve the top leave of absence for Stephanie.
I'll make a motion to approve the additional leave of absence for Ms. Courant as presented.
Thank you, Shane. Do I have a second?
I'll second.
By Jack. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, abstaining, we're unanimous. All right, back down to the
Yeah,
teacher nominations.
Thank you. So teacher nominations, these are new hires for next year. So we're busy. Mrs. Kohler and all the folks in the buildings have been busy hiring, and you'll see here that we're starting to make some progress. So
Right.
we would ask for your approval of the teacher nominations as presented.
Can I ask a question first?
Yeah, go ahead, Dan.
So if we already did something for Samantha, do we have to undo that in order to redo it for the new position at 100%?
So the 40%,
Because I'm presuming she's going to 100% special ed, or is that going to be a 60%?
Wendy, can you clarify this?
Yes, she's going to 100% special ed at Mountain View, leaving her position at Bartlett, which is a part-time art position currently.
So she was previously approved, so this would be
Yes.
a new approval as a special ed teacher, which would supersede the previous approval, if that makes sense.
Does it actually supersede it, or do we have to take action to take it back?
I don't think we have to take it back. You can't have two contracts concurrently, so
Right.
we're going to approve this contract to be issued.
Okay, so
and
we
then-
approved a contract to be offered.
Yes.
It has not been signed.
I don't know if it's been signed or not, but again, you can't sign two
Right.
contracts at the same time.
But if she did sign the contract, we need to approve the resignation so that she can sign this new contract. That's, I don't want this to be a bad loophole
Right.
where we can't have two contracts because one hasn't been undone and we haven't approved it being undone.
What was the art for this year?
Yes.
So the special ed is for next year.
So the art would have originally been for next year, because it was
Yes, but
approved
she's-
on April 1st, '24. So that
Yes,
would
I
have been for
apologize, but
next
that's her
year.
current position is what I,
Okay.
Yeah.
Yes.
Which will end at the end of the school year,
Yes.
and then the new position would start after.
right. But as Mr. Bulkey stated, I'm not sure if she had signed her art
I'm not
contract. I
sure.
don't know the answer to
Would it
that.
be safe just to mention that in the motion so that
We certainly
don't
could,
get in-
and
Yeah,
again,
just to make sure we're covered.
the last dated agreement would be the one that we would be focusing on from
Agreed.
this individual.
Agreed.
Yep, but
Okay.
if you want, we could certainly do that.
All right, so we need a motion for the teacher nominations. Dan, do you want to do it?
I'll make a motion, we approve the teacher nominations as presented with the understanding that Samantha's previous 40% FTE art is rescinded.
Thank you, Dan. Do I have a second?
Second.
By Jack. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, abstaining, we're unanimous. All right, the next one, support staff.
Yeah, so this next batch is two together that are support staff specialists. We call them SSS positions. These are non-union positions. So we have two nominations for next year. One is for a speech and language pathology assistant, and the other is for Carol Smith, who is our career resource specialist, who's been here at the high school for a long time.
All right, go ahead, Jared.
Just as a question, as these are not union, do we have to review the contract or salary and compensation for these?
So we have that, I believe.
And would that need to be discussed in non-public?
I have the amounts for non-public, so actually, good catch, Jared.
Those in non-public?
So
Okay.
we can wait to do that batch until after non-public, and same thing for the next batch. The technology group as a whole, all of those salaries and amounts will be discussed in non-public. So we
Okay.
will have the administrator nominations, the support staff specialist nominations, and the technology nominations that we will need to do after non-public.
Okay.
So we'll pause on those. We can, however, keep going on the backside of your staffing sheet, co-curricular non-sports nominations. So we have two for art club and garden club.
All right, I'll need a motion for this one.
I'll make a motion to approve the co-curricular non-sports nominations.
Thank you, Shane. Do I have a second? By
Second.
Jack. All right, all those in favor say aye.
Aye. Aye.
Opposed, abstaining, we're unanimous. And the last one.
Yeah, so did your motion just address the second batch too, Shane?
Did just say, it didn't specify the year.
So it's funny because I was looking at that, I'm like, wait, these are for the spring, it looks like. whereas
Yeah,
these
so those are
next
for
year.
the spring and the rest are for next year.
So,
Amend your motion.
yeah, I'd like to amend my motion.
Or you could just do another motion.
You can do it.
Doesn't matter.
I could, I'll just do another one, it's easier. I'll approve the co-curricular non-sports nominations for the 2024-2025 school year.
And Jack, you're
second
good
those.
with your
Sure.
second? Thank you. Good catch, Nicole. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, abstaining, we're unanimous. All right, now for sports for 2024, 2025.
No.
That's the one we just did.
Yeah, I thought we did 2023,
His
2024.
new one was 24, 25.
Okay,
So we're good.
we are good. Okay. Jeez, okay.
I know.
So we're good with staffing?
We're good with staffing.
Okay. All right, other business that may legally come before the meeting.
Calendar?
Yeah, we have the new calendar with the new date, or updated date is
18th?
June 18th, which is an early release.
Yeah, who would have thought we'd have a snow day in the first week of April? Come on.
I know. And then, that's it?
That's it.
All right, so we have non-public, which one are we going into
A.
first? A. All right, I'll need a motion to go non-public, session RSA 91A 32A.
So moved.
By Dan, do I have a second?
Second.
By, Ginny, was that you? Retta? Do roll call.
Yes.
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 And yes, all right, so we're in non-public, so we'll go down to
Yep, we'll go down.